Terrorism on the continent, after all, brings them something far more valuable than peace, influence, resources, and control. But now, a new player has entered the scene, one that's not just allegedly involved, but has openly admitted to collaborating with armed groups in Africa's volatile Sahel region. That country? Ukraine. Yes, the same Ukraine currently locked in a brutal war with Russia. And now, Russia claims to have leaked explosive intelligence, documents that point directly to Ukrainian involvement in covert operations across Mali.
In a move that's sending shockwaves across continents, Russia just handed over classified intel to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, evidence so damning it could rewrite everything we thought we knew about Africa's security crisis. What's in this report? Alleged Ukrainian fingerprints on weapons caches, coordinated funding of rebel militias, and a covert game of chess stretching from Kiev to the Sahel. This isn't just diplomacy, it's warfare by proxy. And Traoré, he's not backing down.
But now, a new player has entered the scene, one that's not just allegedly involved, but has openly admitted to collaborating with armed groups in Africa's volatile Sahel region. That country? Ukraine. Yes, the same Ukraine currently locked in a brutal war with Russia. And now, Russia claims to have leaked explosive intelligence, documents that point directly to Ukrainian involvement in covert operations across Mali.
Tonight, we dive into the files, the fallout, and what this means for Africa's fight for sovereignty. Buckle up. This rabbit hole goes deep. The secret intelligence briefing that changed everything. Burkina Faso's president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, wasn't expecting a bombshell when he stepped into the undisclosed security briefing in Ouagadougou last week. But what Russian intelligence operatives placed on his desk would shake Africa to its core. A dossier stamped confidential, eyes-only revealed intercepted communications, thermal satellite imagery, and detailed financial trails, all pointing in one explosive direction. Ukrainian operatives, embedded and well-funded, were arming jihadist factions not only in Mali, but deep into northern Burkina Faso. These weren't freelancers. The evidence exposed a covert, Western-backed Ukrainian intelligence network, deliberately fueling insurgency to destabilize the Sahel. Russia's message was unmistakable. This wasn't just Cold War-era proxy games, it was deliberate sabotage disguised as foreign aid and democracy building. For Traoré, this wasn't paranoia, it was proof that the chaos plaguing West Africa wasn't organic. It was manufactured, manipulated by forces far beyond the continent. And unlike others who might have buried the scandal to preserve shaky alliances, Traoré leaned in. He demanded every unredacted file, every photograph, every payment receipt. Because for Traoré, this wasn't a diplomatic inconvenience, it was war. While other presidents might have looked the other way, Traoré saw the moment for what it was, a geopolitical turning point. With this smoking gun in hand, he could finally flip the forces, turning years of Western accusations and media smears back toward their source. Suddenly, he wasn't just protecting Burkina Faso. He was about to pull the curtain back on the greatest covert destabilization plot since the Cold War. The world wouldn't be able to look away. Ukraine's shadow war in Africa. What the evidence reveals. The documents in Traoré's hands were damning. Russian surveillance drones had tracked illegal weapons convoys from Eastern Europe landing in airstrips across Niger and Chad. Routes that eventually funneled RPGs, AKs, and advanced explosives straight into the hands of insurgent cells in Burkina Faso's northern provinces. But what sealed the case were the voice recordings. Ukrainian agents, speaking in encrypted channels, discussed financial kickbacks, coordination with mercenaries, and manipulating tribal rivalries to distract and dismantle Pan-African unity. One voice, allegedly belonging to a Ukrainian intelligence officer, even joked, "As long as they're fighting each other, they won't build another bricks." This wasn't just sabotage, it was economic warfare. The idea? Destabilize the region long enough to derail African nations from energy independence and infrastructure development. And make no mistake, Traoré saw the big picture. Ukraine wasn't acting alone. Western NGOs provided the humanitarian cover, while shadow contractors moved the real cargo. All this while, Western media framed Traoré as the villain for cracking down on freedom fighters. But now, the tables were turning. With Russia's data, Traoré had something better than denials. He had receipts, real-time tracking of every dollar, every bullet, and every lie. And with that, the global chessboard shifted. Africa wasn't the pawn anymore. Thanks to Traoré, it was about to call check.
Mr. President, friends, we are very glad to see you. And first of all, I would like to thank you once again for making this decision to participate in the commemorative events to honor the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. I remember our constructive and useful conversation back in 2023 when you visited our country for the first time to participate in the Russia-Africa Summit in St.
The African Awakening. Traoré mobilizes the Sahel. Within 72 hours of receiving the intel, Ibrahim Traoré convened an emergency summit with his closest allies, Mali's Assimi Goïta and Niger's General Abdourahmane Chiani. Behind closed doors, maps were unrolled, timelines analyzed, and counter-strategies devised. The conclusion: the Sahel was under siege, and it wasn't from local jihadists, it was a foreign-engineered insurgency. Traoré proposed a radical doctrine: Pan-African defensive sovereignty, no more dependence on French intelligence, no more waiting on UN mandates. Burkina Faso would take the lead in building an African-led intelligence-sharing alliance backed by regional military drills and border militarization. What stunned his counterparts wasn't just the boldness, it was the detail. Traoré had Russian-provided satellite proof of infiltration routes and potential saboteurs embedded in NGOs and aid groups. But the real power move came when Traoré announced Burkina Faso's new drone surveillance hub funded jointly by Moscow and Ouagadougou. The hub, operational in 30 days, would track all unauthorized air traffic and supply movements. As the summit ended, Goïta reportedly turned to Traoré and said, "You've just declared Africa's independence again. This time with data." That moment cemented Traoré's role, not just as Burkina Faso's defender, but as Africa's frontline general in a shadow war waged by powers terrified of a self-sufficient continent.
A lot of nations are fighting for their survival, sovereignty, and peace. And the Sahel region is part of the area feeling heavy pressure and influence of imperialism.
France and the West panic as the story leaks. The Western media scrambled. Le Monde dismissed the Russian files as disinformation. The BBC ran a vague piece on unverified reports. But behind the scenes, embassies were panicking. French diplomats sought emergency meetings in Ouagadougou, offering re-engagement packages. Washington dispatched a low-level State Department envoy to express concerns over rising anti-Western sentiment. But Traoré didn't budge. Instead, he did the unthinkable. He leaked snippets of the Russian evidence during a live broadcast on RT Africa. The footage showed coordinates of weapons caches and voice snippets from Ukrainian agents laughing about recolonizing the Sahel through chaos. That clip went viral across Africa in under 24 hours. Hashtags like #Africa under attack and #expose Ukraine trended from Lagos to Nairobi. Western influence crumbled like sand in a storm. African youth, already disillusioned with colonial leftovers, now had a face for the chaos. Not just France, but Ukraine too. And while Western leaders hoped to contain the fallout, Traoré amplified it. He gave interviews. He doubled down. They thought we wouldn't find out. But Africa watches now, he said on state TV. That quote lit a fire across the continent. For the West, this wasn't just a diplomatic crisis, it was the beginning of a public reckoning. And for Traoré, it was only the first strike.
But how did Burkina Faso, once dismissed as too weak to defend itself, manage to pull off one of the most effective ambushes in Sahel history? Let's break it down. The war didn't begin when the drones took off, or when the Cobra units took position, or even when the first shot was fired. It started much earlier, quietly and out of sight.
Traoré's counteroffensive, Operation Black Phoenix. With the intel exposed and the enemy identified, President Traoré launched Operation Black Phoenix, a regional military campaign rooted in precision, intelligence, and unapologetic nationalism. It began with simultaneous raids on NGO compounds suspected of being intelligence covers. Armed with Russian satellite guidance and local informants, the Burkinabe Special Forces confiscated encrypted devices, unlicensed drone tech, and over $2 million in foreign currency. But that was just Phase 1. Phase 2, a sweeping crackdown on financial channels. Traoré's administration froze over 200 suspicious bank accounts linked to Ukrainian shell corporations and launched a public inquiry into humanitarian funds gone missing. The world gasped. Western officials called it authoritarian overreach, but Burkinabe citizens called it justice. Across Ouagadougou, murals of Traoré rose, depicting him as a lion swatting foreign hands from Africa's soil. Most critical, though, was Phase 3, the deployment of AI-enhanced patrol drones along the porous northern borders. These drones, guided by Russian algorithms and trained Burkinabe pilots, identified smuggling routes in real time. Just days in, weapons convoys were seized, and several high-ranking insurgents with foreign passports were arrested. One of them, a former NATO contractor. With each phase, Traoré wasn't just restoring order, he was reclaiming sovereignty, and the message to the world was unmistakable: Africa will defend itself, with or without your permission.
The images showed a jaw-dropping display of military strength. Over 100 vehicles, including trucks, tanks, and other heavy equipment, rolling through Mali. Instead of waiting for facts, Western media rushed to flood the internet with wild guesses and dramatic headlines. It's like they couldn't resist spinning their own stories about the Malian government and its military leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta. Let's break this down. On January 17th, 2025, Malian state TV showed footage of a convoy entering the country.
How the African street sees it: Traoré, the people's hero. You can't buy the kind of loyalty Traoré now commands from the African street. In Ouagadougou, school children chant his name. Market women wear his face on their fabrics. TikTok is flooded with videos comparing him to Sankara. Only this time, the revolution has drones and receipts. What makes Traoré different isn't just his defiance, it's his transparency. He didn't just expose a foreign plot, he shared it with his people. And that truth-telling resonates deeper than any military parade. For years, Africans were told their suffering was self-inflicted. That insurgency was a result of poor governance, not foreign greed. But Traoré shattered that narrative. He connected the dots and handed the pen to the people. Suddenly, disillusionment turned to purpose. Youth-led security patrols formed. Farmers volunteered logistics for military convoys. Artists painted murals warning against foreign NGOs. Even in the diaspora, protests erupted outside Ukrainian and French embassies, demanding accountability. What the West underestimated was the emotional weight of being lied to for generations. Traoré didn't just expose a scheme, he validated a people's pain. And now, he's not just Burkina Faso's president. He's the voice of a generation tired of being pawns, ready to be kings. That's not popularity, that's power.
Much like the rest of West Africa, under the pretext of anti-insurgency, the French troops arrived. They had one goal in mind: to destroy the Islamist organizations tearing apart the Sahel. However, the insurgents grew every year. Towns collapsed. People perished. Prosperity fell apart. The mouth was easy for those who experienced it. Things deteriorated the longer the French stayed.
International fallout. The Global South takes notice. It didn't take long for the rest of the Global South to take note. Venezuela publicly backed Traoré's findings, calling them a modern echo of imperial sabotage. Iran offered to supply Burkina Faso with advanced signal jamming tech to counter Western drones. India proposed a joint cybersecurity training initiative. Even Brazil hinted at opening a Pan-African diplomatic hub in Ouagadougou. The message was clear: Traoré's bravery had redrawn the global lines. For decades, Africa was treated as a resource pit stop, a place to exploit, pity, or preach to. But now, thanks to Traoré's bold exposure, Africa became the stage where global hypocrisy got called out. Western media tried to pivot, running deep dives into African grievances, but it was too late. The narrative belonged to the South now. News outlets from Jakarta to Johannesburg ran with headlines like "The Day Africa Fought Back" and "Burkina Faso Breaks the Chain." And while G7 leaders fumbled PR statements, BRICS quietly invited Traoré to a closed-door summit. He didn't just get a seat, he got a standing ovation. In just weeks, Traoré had done what decades of summits couldn't: unite the global South with evidence, urgency, and unapologetic pride. He wasn't playing defense anymore. He was leading the counterattack, the beginning of a new African doctrine. What comes next may define Africa's next 50 years. Inspired by Traoré's decisive leadership, several Sahel nations are drafting the Ouagadougou Doctrine, a Pan-African manifesto that prioritizes intelligence independence, regional defense manufacturing, and anti-infiltration policies targeting Western shadow actors. Key clauses include mandatory audits of foreign NGOs, restrictions on dual passport holders in security zones, and the creation of a Sahelian cyber command to intercept digital sabotage. But perhaps the boldest proposal? A continental tribunal to prosecute foreign-funded destabilization as crimes against African sovereignty. Traoré, in his address to the Burkinabe National Assembly, declared, "We will not be the chessboard anymore. We will be the players." The room erupted. But this isn't about revenge, it's about rebalance. Africa is tired of being polite while being gutted. And Traoré's revelations didn't just spark outrage, they sparked blueprints. University students in Ghana now study the Russian files. Kenyan think tanks are analyzing drone strategies. Nigerian bloggers dissect Operation Black Phoenix like military analysts. This isn't a news cycle, it's a movement. And it's all because one man dared to read the fine print, call the bluff, and light the match. Traoré didn't just expose a plot, he ignited a doctrine, and Africa will never be the same. So, what does this explosive intel really mean for Africa? For Traoré, it's confirmation of what he's long suspected, that global powers are treating Africa like a battleground for their proxy wars. But now, the curtain's been pulled back, and the world is watching. Will this spark new alliances, or trigger even deeper divisions? One thing is clear, Traoré won't stay silent, and neither should we. Hit that like button if you stand for truth, and subscribe for more uncensored updates from the heart of the global power struggle. Africa is rising, and the game is changing.